Hello and welcome to a Week 7 edition of the Bleacher Report Fantasy Football Show. My name is Adam Levitan of EstablishRun.com. As always, joined by Michael Leone sporting a fresh neon sign behind him. Michael, how's it going today?
Pretty good. Slowly just trying to compete with the skin to fur graphic behind you. So chipping away at that.
Good for you. On today's show, we are going to cover stars to sell before it's too late, or just generally players to sell before it's too late while you still can. In other words, some sell high guys that we think are going to underperform the rest of the season. During the show, we'll be happy to take some questions from you guys as long as you're normal humans. Take as many as we can, so feel free to get those in through the chat. We'll talk through that. And we have a list of 5 here. Let's get right into it with number 5 on our list of players to sell before it's too late. Number 5 is going to be Rachaad White. So Rachaad White has been a very good fill-in for Bucky Irving. And I think everybody knew that would happen because Rachaad White has a very fantasy-friendly game. He's a very good pass catcher, and he plays reasonably well around the goal line. I'm not sure on Bucky Irving's injury right now. There is some not great speculation out there about how long he could be out, but I do think that he's definitely going to be back for the fantasy playoffs. And so there are some people out there who are like, man, I just need some running back production for the next 2 to 3 weeks. If you have a good team, I think it's an interesting time to try to get rid of Rachaad White here and load up your team for the playoffs when I'm not sure Rachaad White's even going to be startable in the fantasy playoffs. So, Leone, what do you think will happen when Bucky gets back? And any more thoughts on the Rachaad White run out rest of season?
Yeah, I don't think this is a case where Rachaad White has played so well that it's going to be, him taking a small chunk of the lead away from Bucky Irving. I think it's going to go back to pretty much the split it was before, which is pretty heavy Bucky Irving. You're still going to get White mixing in, catching a few passes, but as you said, not startable. If you just look at the efficiency of the two players, Bucky broke out last year, really strong yards per carry. Rachaad White, always been a little bit subpar there. Performed a little bit better when he wasn't in that workhorse role, but 2 straight weeks now as the starter, puts up 2.9 yards per carry, 3.8 yards per carry. Same story for him from before he was overtaken by Bucky Irving. He just really isn't a burner and that efficient of a back. So there's no replacing Bucky when it comes to that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Let's go to number 4, Nick Chubb. So I'm curious what you think on this, Leone, but there's some people out there who think that Woody Marks is never going to fully take over this backfield. I think people that are optimistic on the rookie stuff are more optimistic that Woody will eventually take over. My lean for now is Nick Chubb will have the lead role when they're winning games. I don't know how many games they're going to win. I don't think they're that good. And number 2, I do think there's some chance down the stretch it's not Nick Chubb even when they're winning games. And so if you can get something for Nick Chubb now, I know it's not going to be a lot, but if you get something for Nick Chubb from a running back desperate team, I think by the end of the year, you'll rather have Woody Marks. That's my take, at least for now. Leone, how do you think it runs out late season between Marks and Chubb?
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about Chubb's ability to hold up for a full season. Getting towards 30 years old, coming back from significant injuries. It's been a great story that he's been able to be somewhat productive as a starting running back for Houston, but you do have to have those concerns on his efficiency and durability long term. And for a team coming out of the bye week, if they do start to slant stuff towards Woody Marks, you're never going to be able to sell Nick Chubb once that happens. It's never coming back. So maybe it's too early to do that, but it's one of those things where you better to trade him a week too early than a week too late because you're toast. And in terms of overall upside, Marks beats out Chubb because if he does win the role, he's got work in the pass game that he can do. Like that's sort of his calling card is his ability to be used as a receiver out of the backfield. Chubb's already got a couple of games with no catches on the docket, really just catching like the screens and obvious check down. So it doesn't give you that same upside that Marks will as a receiver.
Yeah, I think if Woody Marks is on waivers in your league and it's a reasonably deep league, something like 10, 12 teams, I think he probably should be on benches just to see how this goes after the bye in the next few weeks here with Woody Marks. And I mean, if you think the Texans are going to be losing in any games, You can just start Woody Marks even with the split that it was now. Let's go to number three. All right, our first controversial one here on the list, Leone, is going to be George Pickens. So maybe the cat is out of the bag on George Pickens, right? Maybe he's just played so well while CeeDee Lamb has been injured that they have to keep funneling stuff towards him, have to keep moving around the formation. When CeeDee Lamb was in there in the early part of the year, it wasn't that great for George Pickens in terms of usage. CeeDee Lamb's expected back this week. Are you worried that George Pickens' role gets far, far worse? Because right now, man, I mean, he's been like the best receiver in fantasy while CeeDee Lamb has been out. So how do you think this goes with CeeDee Lamb back?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that he's going to take a hit from a fantasy perspective. The volume, the targets have to go down. He was okay though, I think, with CeeDee Lamb. He had the four target opener in a tough spot against Philly, but drew a couple long DPIs in that game that aren't going to be, seen in the box score traditionally. And then the game against the Giants, had a nine target game. He scored a touchdown now in what, five straight games. I think there's a chance for him to still be in like the low 20% target share range, which playing with Dak Prescott, having that help from CeeDee Lamb, he's going to be a really efficient player there. So I think he's going to be a really, really good contributor. It's just kind of in the trade market, is someone going to overpay for what they've seen recently and give you like the full star treatment for George Pickens? If they are, obviously you want to take that because there's no doubt the volume has to come down. But I am pretty optimistic that he's going to be a very good locked in starter in almost all leagues rest of season.
Yeah. I mean, George Pickens was one of my most drafted players, or I think my most drafted player this summer and this run out. Like, I'm not going to victory lap it because it's like CeeDee Lamb's absence has been a huge reason why George Pickens is the wide receiver four in full PPR formats here this year. I'll just say that part of the thesis before the season was Dallas's defense is going to be so bad. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball well. I was wrong about that. They have run the ball well for the most part, but their defense is so bad. Dak's going to end up dropping back 40 times a game. Dak could lead the entire NFL in passing yards. And if that is the case, then even if George Pickens is the clear two behind CeeDee Lamb, he can still be a really strong fantasy play on a weekly basis. Let's go to number two before we get to some chats here from the people. Number two is going to be Rico Dowdle. So, one of the biggest stories in fantasy this week is what is going to happen with Chuba Hubbard's return. Chuba Hubbard is limited in practice this week. I think he's going to be back. I don't know for sure. But the longer term question is, has Rico Dowdle played so well, Leone, that when Chuba Hubbard comes back, Rico Dowdle is just going to be like, you know what? I'm too good. And Chuba Hubbard's going to be a role player behind Rico Dowdle. Or do you think it goes to 50-50? Or do you think Chuba Hubbard gets his job back? How do you think it goes in Carolina's backfield?
Yeah, my brain almost can't handle this playing DFS the last couple of weeks. If you would have told me Rico Dowdle would be winning DFS tournaments, not because he just kind of got lucky and fell into the end zone a few times, but because he racked up about 200 yards rushing per game and, over like 450 yards from scrimmage over two games, I would not have believed you. There's almost 0% probability I would give in on that happening. So when it's such an extreme outcome like this, I do think there's a decent chance that Rico's carved out the very lead role, even with Chuba back. We'll kind of see how it plays out. There's obviously always going to be risk, and that's what's tough with buying and selling these players who have these huge performances. You're gonna be in some leagues where someone's just gonna overpay and see those huge box scores the last two weeks. But you're gonna be in some leagues where people are like, no, Chuba's back, Rico's worthless, and he might even be a buy in those types of situations where it's like, who knows? Maybe he did hold off Chuba because this production, it's extremely small sample, so you don't want to go overboard with it, but it was also such an extreme result. Chuba's done nothing like this in all his starts that, there is part of me that wants to bet on this being a little bit of an outlier and Rico really taking the number one spot. But to be clear, though, I don't think there's any situation where he has the same workload he did the last 2 weeks with Chuba back.
Right.
I think you're looking at like he's on the right side of a 65-35 split.
Right, exactly. So, like the best case scenario, I mean, they gave Chuba Hubbard 30 something million dollars. Like, they can't just bench him for Rico Dowdle completely. What they can do is say, hey, Rico's played so well. He's going to be the lead guy. And Dave Canales needs to win games. Bryce Young needs to win games. They probably want Rico in there right now. And so, in a best case scenario, I think 65, 35, 70, 30, Rico in favor of Chuba. I will say calf injuries can linger and not be great. So, I still want to make sure that if you do sell Rico Dowdle, that you get something pretty good in return for him. It's like Leone said, I think it has a lot to do with what how your league mates are viewing Rico Dowdle. All right. We are men of the people. Let's get to some chats here. First one from Phil De Prima says, should I trade Kamani Vidal? So Amari Hampton is on IR, which means he's going to miss 4 weeks. There was a report last week that not only would Amari Hampton miss 4 weeks, that he's probably not going to be back when that 4 week stretches up. He's going to be out longer than that. So maybe another 4 to 6 weeks or another 4 to 5 weeks on Amari Hampton. Kimani Vidal ran circles around Hassan Haskins last week. That was against Miami, though. And so, can he sustain that is a question for me. If you had Kimani Vidal, Leone, are you selling or holding on Vidal?
I'm probably holding just because I'm guessing there aren't that many people that are going to pay up for a name that is far from a household name, unless you were part of the best ball hive of last year that drafted him.
Yeah.
Never wrong, just early. But yeah, I don't think you're going to get a ton in the trade market, but so I think he's probably a hold. He outcarried Haskins. He didn't just outproduce, he outcarried him 18-6, which is a huge thing for Vidal. He was already probably the option here, even going into last week, that provided the most upside in the passing game of Vidal and Haskins. Haskins is mostly like a plotter that you're just giving the ball to and hopefully to get the goal line stuff. So really encouraging. And to put that in perspective, in our rest of season top 150, we've got Vidal right around Michael Pittman, Jordan Mason, Jake Ferguson. So these are some pretty strong names. So we're taking
Mhm.
a pretty optimistic viewpoint on Kamani Vidal. So I think he's probably a hold, given that in most leagues.
Yeah, and that goes to our next question from Jake Dudd. He says, I have Rico Dowdle and Vidal to package for a wide receiver. Who would be a good target? I mean, if someone needs running back help, you could be asking for something pretty good. Maybe AJ Brown, people might be willing to sell low on. Maybe Brian Thomas, Jalen Waddle, Ted McMillan. If you have time to wait for Emeka Egbuka to get back from his hamstring injury, I think that's an okay one. Zay Flowers, I think, is a good buy low. Like, I would be asking for some pretty good players, some pretty good wide receivers who are underperforming there. So yeah, hope that helps Jake Dudd. Uh, Teddy Sacco says, should I trade Jamar Chase for Devon Achan? So Jamar Chase is playing tonight in this game with Joe Flacco. I'm curious what you thought of Joe Flacco in his first game here. It wasn't the cleanest spot. Packers certainly have a good rush defense, but you saw Jamar Chase get there late, and that's what Joe Flacco can give you. Has a big arm, is willing to throw down the field. Coaches are willing to drop Joe Flacco back 40, 45, 50 times in a game. They're not willing to do that with a lot of other kind of quarterbacks. And so I like Joe Flacco for Jamar Chase. Obviously, he's not Joe Burrow, but I like him for it. What do you think, Achan or Jamar Chase rest of season?
Yeah, man, it is crazy how these coaches trust Flacco. Comes in, really tough matchup, not a lot of time to get acclimated, drops back almost 50 times. And I think we talked about this last week, but with Flacco, these dropbacks are pass attempts. They're not sacks. He's done a really good job, even behind a bad Cincy O-line. He only took one sack in all those dropbacks against a good Green Bay pass rush, and obviously he's not scrambling either. So I think it's pretty good for Jamar Chase. I think he's going to provide round one roughly fantasy output rest of season. We've got him ranked 18th overall. I'm probably a little bit more optimistic than that. We've got Achan 10th. I do say I think I'd go with Achan. I think he's got this, we saw the game-breaking speed and upside with a long touchdown run against the Chargers last week. He gets absolutely loaded up in the passing game. This is kind of like a mini Christian McCaffrey situation, just not on a team that's, been as good as the 49ers have been. So I'd probably stick with Achan, but there's systemic risk to both these offenses.
For sure. Saints for Days says, do I accept Jalen Waddle for Rico Dowdle? I'd be getting Waddle. Yeah, in a vacuum, I think I'd rather have Waddle. I mean, the Chuba Hubbard situation we just talked about, and Waddle is the alpha without Tyreek Hill. And it doesn't sound like Mike McDaniel is going to get fired. I do think that matters. Like, Mike McDaniel is a very good schemer, offensive play caller. He might not be the best head coach, but I want him in there calling plays for Jalen Waddle. So I think that matters. But yeah, I'd rather have Waddle over Dowdle. Leone, what do you think?
Yeah, we don't even have it close in our trade calculator. That's a perfect example of a spot, a league where you would want to sell high on Rico.
Jake Dudd says, should I offer Dowdle, Vidal, and Quentin Johnston for CeeDee Lamb? So it's going to depend how deep your team is. Typically, I like giving up 2 for 1s, 3 for 1s to get the best player because I think that if we're working hard and paying attention and being smart, we can outplay our opponents in start sit on waivers, etc. So I like getting stars, but this is a lot to give up here. Leone, Dowdle, Vidal, and QJ for CeeDee. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, our redraft trade calculator ETR is not perfect, but we do try to make adjustments for these lopsided trades where one side's the star and the other side's throwing a bunch at it. If you didn't make that adjustment, it would tell you to take the 3 for 1 side, but that adjustment's pretty big in this case. And we have CD Lamb ahead in our trade calculator by about 10% or so. And I agree with that. I want the alpha, the best player in the deal. You're trading three guys that are strong fantasy assets, but they're not absolute league winners, in my opinion. And CD Lamb is in pretty rare category. He's a top 5 player, assuming he comes back healthy.
Jomies Fashiz says, I just traded Kenneth Walker for CeeDee Lamb. My God. If K9 gets traded, did I win that one? Yeah, you won that one, I think, regardless. I don't think Kenneth Walker is going to end up getting traded. They're just like playing too well. Why rock the boat? I know there was the rumor out there today about Achan for Witherspoon. That's like trades like that really rarely actually happen. So yeah, congrats to you on getting CeeDee Lamb for Kenneth Walker. One more here before we get to our back to our list. Says Mooley says, would you give up Rico and Pickens for Drake? I believe he's referring to Drake May. Maybe this is a
Drake
super.
London, probably.
Oh, Drake London. Yes. Rico and Pickens for Drake London. That's an interesting one, Leonie. My first instinct is that I'd rather have the Rico and Pickens side, but part of that depends on what you think about Rico. I know we do have Rico pretty low in our rest of season top 150 rankings. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, our calculator prefers the Drake London side by a decent bit. On feel, I have it a little bit closer. I think I might be a touch higher on Pickens, a touch higher on Rico than
Yeah.
we have it. So I think it's pretty fair and would just come down to, your running back situation. If you are strong at running back, then it's pretty clearly you want to make that upgrade from Pickens to London. But if you're not strong at running back, I don't think there's any issue staying put and rolling the dice that Rico stays ahead of Chuba.
One point that I wanted to make is that I love Drake London. I think he's awesome. A lot of his biggest games have come with Darnell Mooney on the sideline. And Darnell Mooney was on the sideline for this game. I don't know when Darnell Mooney's coming back. He's had a mess of an offseason and start to the year. But when Darnell Mooney comes back, I don't think it's like bad for Drake London, but caps the upside, I think at least just a hair. All right. The people have been waiting with bated breath for our number one player to sell before it's too late. It's Ashton Genty. And we did pull some notes from the Microsoft Copilot here, Leone. What did the Copilot have to say about Genty and first round running backs?
Yeah, if you take a look at the first round running backs that have finished top 12 as RB1s in their position, there's been 6 of them the last 10 years. And we've got Bijan Robinson, Najee Harris, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacob, Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott. Saquon finished RB1, Zeke finished RB2, Najee finished RB3. So you do see these rookie backs that are drafted early, have a lot of investment, have some talent, generally have a very high floor and high ceiling in fantasy football. But we're going to talk a little bit more about Genty's outlook specifically rest of season.
So this Geno Smith situation is like way worse than I thought. And I get it. Maybe I was too high on Geno. He's played really better than people think the last 2 years, but he's been atrocious this year. They have one of the worst offensive lines in the league. They lost Colton Miller. This game against the Titans was like the only spot I was like, yep, this is a great spot for Ashton Genty. And he still only averaged 3.3 yards per carry. When they are losing, I'm not even sure they're going to have Genty out there. And think about their next 3 games at Chiefs, versus Jaguars, at Broncos. How many points are the Raiders going to score in Arrowhead against a very good Jaguars defense and in Mile High, aka Invesco Field? So I don't know how many points they're going to score. I don't know how close they're going to be to the end zone. I don't even know that Genti's going to play on pass downs. They also, after that, have a game against the Browns. That's a difficult spot. They have another game against the Broncos. In the fantasy playoffs, they play at Philly, at Texans, two really tough spots. And then home against Giants is a good spot in week 17. But yeah, I mean, I'm just worried about them systemically. And it's nothing to do with Ashton Genty. They're going to be losing so many of these games. It's not a good spot for running back value. So this would go against the trend, Leone, of really highly picked running backs finishing really high in fantasy. But I think it might be too late soon to get rid of him. This next 3 game stretch is so brutal. Am I overreacting to the schedule and the offensive line woes and Geno woes for Genty, Leone?
Yeah, first of all, don't hold back when you say it has nothing to do with Ashton Genty, because I've seen the Ashton Genty playing against Pee Wee teams in college football, racking up stats. Then he has to face Penn State and can't do
Mm,
anything takes from you. So
it's true.
Genty did come in as like a really good prospect, though. Production aside, even athletically, if you look at this run that's being shown on the screen right now, though, gotta say I was a little disappointed with the breakaway speed, even though he got there. So there are some efficiency concerns for sure. And something we talked about a lot, Adam, before the season, when we were a little bit lower on Genty than the market, was this was like a loaded first round. And while some of that's hit and some of it hasn't, you do still have a pretty deep top 12 set of players. So if you could flip Genty after 3 straight strong weeks, one was an amazing matchup, one was like a legitimately great game against Chicago, one was a spot where he kind of got force fed some targets that we're not expecting to happen rest of the year. If you could flip him for like an underperforming Saquon Barkley or something, I would definitely try to do that. And with a lot of rookies, you're hoping for, hey, they break out second half of the year. But for a back like Genty, the workload is already there. At the running back position, it's not the same quite as wide receiver is. So um, I don't see this getting a ton better. And I do think this is a really good time to sell them. 3 straight good games. You can kind of sell people on the rookie upside hitting rest this season. When in reality, I'm just seeing like 3 kind of games where he ran pretty hot. And this offense is not one I want to be invested in when there's a lot better fantasy assets on better offenses that you could probably flip him for the rest of the season.
Do you have a take on what's going on with Geno? Like, this is way worse than I thought it could be. And obviously, no Bowers hurts, and Bowers has not been healthy since week 1. That hurts a ton. But he's throwing so short, and man, he's been good the past couple years. Any thoughts on what's going on with Geno this year?
Yeah, a couple thoughts with Geno. One, I mean, he was playing with Jackson Smith and Jigba and DK Metcalf last year. That maybe carried him more than we realized. He's also like he's an anticipation thrower. He's going to give his guys chances, and there have been spots where his receivers, not being as talented, I think have maybe let him down. He's just been a turnover machine is the biggest issue. If you look at his completion percentage, 66%, yards per attempt, 7.3, those numbers are actually pretty in line with what he's done the previous 3 seasons with Seattle. It's not that crazy. Even the touchdown numbers, he's probably on pace to throw for 20 touchdowns again. It's just been really ugly for the team because the turnovers have been so absolutely
Yeah.
brutal. And there's also a lot of production in that very first game against New England, and it's been disappointing since. So, uh, long-winded way of saying I think he'll bounce back a little bit, but we
Yeah,
maybe overrated him a little bit just because he was carried by some
for sure.
very, very strong pass catchers last season. You can see what both Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba are doing, not necessarily in the best of situations this year.
Yep. All right. Do some more chats here before we get out of here. Got a few more minutes. Fo44 says, I'm loaded at wide receiver. Is Jamar Chase for Cam Scattaboo crazy? Yeah, I wouldn't be selling Jamar Chase for Cam Scattaboo. I mean, I get it on Cam Scattaboo. He's the clear goal line back. It's exciting. He runs his head into other people. It's fun, but I'm not giving up Jamar Chase for Cam Scattaboo.
Yeah,
Uh,
Saquon, Achan, I mean, even Genty, who we said to sell high on if you really were desperate, are better than Scattaboo.
Ramondre Garrett Van 27 says Ramondre Stevenson or Kimani Vidal rest of season. I don't think that Ramondre is going to give up this job anytime soon to Travion Henderson. but it's at least possible down the stretch. On the other hand, Amari Hampton could come back. This is a tight one. I think this is pretty close, Leone. Ramondre or Vidal rest of season.
Yeah, it's really tight. If you are really shallow at running back, I might hold on to Ramondre just because probably going to have a guy you can at least start rest of season. But Vidal's the upside play. Ramondre is always going to be splitting. He's going to have a rookie looking over his shoulder. Vidal is the upside play where if Hampton doesn't come back and he ends up the clear RB1 there, even starting this upcoming week, the start sit decision between Vidal and Ramondre is pretty obviously on the Vidal side.
Yeah. A. Goodman says, would you trade Rashad White for Lad McConkey or Zay Flowers? Yes, definitely both. And I actually think Zay Flowers is an incredible buy low right now. I know he's going into the bye week, and that sucks you wouldn't have him this week. But when they come out of it, they are 1-5. Lamar will be back. They're going to be full blast in one of the best schedule setups the rest of the season. So I like buying on Zay Flowers. M. Sanchez, I hope that's not Mark Sanchez. M. Sanchez 144 says, are we trusting Rasheed Rice? Yes. Everything we've heard suggests that Rasheed Rice will step right back in to that role that is so valuable in the Chiefs offense, running short crossers across linebackers' faces. Mahomes hits you, and Rasheed Rice has incredible yak ability. So yes, I would be getting Rasheed Rice into my lineup right away. D. Mitchell says, I need a running back. Should I trade Jake Ferguson for Breece Hall? Oh, a timely one here, Leone, as we've been talking about Breece Hall all day, seemingly. What do you think, Jake Ferguson or Breece Hall?
So a lot of what we said with George Pickens being a sell high applies to Jake Ferguson a little bit too, and maybe even more so because Ferguson has run a little bit pure on the touchdowns. That's not something he does historically well. He's getting force fed a ton of volume. That's going to come down with CeeDee Lamb. And especially if you remain high on George Pickens, I think Ferguson's hurt the most. Like, look, we still have Ferguson rated pretty well. I think we have him tight end 5 rest of the season, which is really, really good. But it's a lot more replaceable than a high end running back. So I would definitely be taking Brees Hall here.
Agreed. Zach Stoffer says, what is Chase Brown's fantasy outlook with Flacco instead of Browning? So I think they're more likely to be around the end zone, which is obviously good for Chase Brown. I think they're more likely to have fewer defenders in the box. In other words, Jake Browning, his arm is so weak, he did not threaten the defense deep. Joe Flacco will threaten the defense deep with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. So I definitely think it's a boost for Chase Brown. He's starting to lose a little bit to Samaje Perine, though, which is not great. And when you're playing so poorly like Chase Brown is, I'm not saying that it's all his fault. I still think he would have been fine with Joe Burrow. But yeah, it's not good when you're losing stuff to Samaje Perine and your team stinks. So yeah, it's just not a great situation here right now. I'm just checking where we have him in the rest of season top one. Yeah, we're at 66 overall on Chase Brown right now in rest of season top 150.
Yeah, weeks 1 through 4, it was about a 70-30 split in snaps played between Chase Brown and Samaje Perine. It's been like 53-47, almost 50-50 the last 2 weeks. Now, part of that's game script because they're getting behind. If they have some games they can actually play ahead with Flacco, I think it's going
Yeah.
to swing back Chase Brown's way. But a little bit concerning when there's not a ton of high value touches in that backfield to begin with. You definitely don't want some of those being siphoned off to Perine.
Uh, Z- Vic Sutton says, "What should I do with Xavier Worthy?" I think Xavier Worthy is just a hold, unless someone really is excited to play him. But given the game log, I don't think that you can sell Xavier Worthy for what he's worth right now. Still think he's a good player. Still think this offense is going to be among the league leaders in passing rate over expectations. So I think Xavier Worthy is a pretty solid hold right now. Who else but me says I traded James Cook, Tedero McMillan, and Rico for ARSB and Pacheco. Yeah, I think you gave up too much. Who else but me? James Cook's obviously a very good asset. Tedder McMillan's a very good asset. We've talked about Rico a ton. I think you gave up a little bit too much, but ARSB is certainly, Amon-Ra is certainly a great guy to have on your team. Is less is more says I traded Derrick Henry and Lad McConkey for Rasheed Rice and Amari Hampton before I knew he got hurt. Was that a bad trade? Um, you're getting Rasheed Rice, so it can't be that bad. But that sucks that Amari got hurt. If Amari hadn't gotten hurt, I think this would be a pretty solid win for you. But as it is, he got hurt. Is what it is. That's life, man. Nothing we can do.
Yeah, we still have it relatively close. If you want to make yourself feel better, you definitely would have been, I think, the winner in this trade. Otherwise, it's just going to hinge on how quickly Hampton can come back and if he's at full strength or not.
Last one is not a question. It's just a comment from Majesty. He said, I wouldn't even give a bag of flaming hot fries for Chase Brown at this point. Well, as someone who's holding a lot of Chase Brown, I'm glad that you had to get that last comment in there, Majesty. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I planted that comment.
Okay. Let's recap our list here. These are the players that we like selling now before it's too late. Number five, Rashad White. Someone might be desperate for short-term running back help. If you can withstand it, Bucky's going to be back, and I don't think that Rashad White's going to be very startable down the stretch. Nick Chubb, I think, is going to continue to lose work to Woody Marks down the stretch here. Want to get out from under that if you can before it is too late. George Pickens has been one of fantasy's best wide receivers while CeeDee Lamb has been out. I still think George Pickens is going to be good, but if someone is valuing George Pickens as like a top 20, top 25 player right now based on the run that he's been on, I think selling George Pickens now before CeeDee Lamb gets back makes sense. Rico Dowdle, they're not just going to push Chuba Hubbard to the curb. I think 65-35, we talked about 70-30 is a best case scenario for Rico Dowdle ahead of Chuba Hubbard. And then the number one player to sell high on while you still can, Ashton Genty, just brutal matchups. He's going to pop up for some big games, but some people might be willing to pay a top 20, top 15 tag for Ashton Genty right now without looking at the schedule coming up. Kansas City, Denver twice, Houston, Cleveland. It's tough. That is our list of players to sell high on while you still can. Appreciate everyone being here, hanging out, submitting some thoughtful and reasonable questions as reasonable humans that you are. For Leone, for everyone behind the scenes of Bleacher Report and everyone behind the scenes at ETR, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.